What's up YouTube, Capital G here, talking about terrible archetypes in this video and asking the question, what do you believe is the worst archetype in the Arc V era? So obviously Arc V gave us some really good archetypes. In fact, it might be my favorite thing from this entire era is just how much diversity there was as far as like the mechanics go in the competitive meta. I mean, we had good ritual decks like Necroz, Infusion, Synchros, Ixi, Pendulum. You can't name basically a mechanic that failed. Even when you go into things like normal monsters and like the tribute summon mechanic and, you know, union monsters with like ABC, everything was basically shining this era. But for every Zodiac and every Necroz, there were some really shitty archetypes. And as we're ending the Arc V era officially, you know, basically we're only a couple of weeks away from national season, and after Worlds, the Arc V era will be, you know, officially closed as far as the TCG goes. I just kind of want to look back and talk about some of those just beyond garbage archetypes. And I'm not making this video for anybody to get triggered. Obviously, this is just my opinion. I'm asking for you guys' opinion, and I'm not talking about archetypes that are just quote unquote bad, right? So you guys know I love Lunar Lights, that's my base, but you know, I can objectionably look at them and say, yeah, they're bad. They're basically, Lunar Lights are kind of like a poor man's version of Fluffles, because Fluffles and Lunar Lights basically do the same thing. Fluffles just does everything a little bit better, but I don't think Lunar Lights are like completely garbage here. I'm talking about decks that either they're just so mechanically flawed or they're so fragile, or decks that just, even when they work, Team APS said this in one of their videos and I thought it was brilliant. I think it was Trell. He was like, even when the deck works, it doesn't work. And a lot of these archetypes, I'm going to talk about 5 of them specifically, and yeah, there are 3 of them up here, like even when they work, they just honestly don't work. So I'm gonna just go ahead and talk about these, and if I miss one, or maybe you guys disagree, maybe you think Lunar Lights is the worst archetype, just leave it in the comment section below. So let's start off with Amorphages, and this is one that is kind of strange because when you looked at Amorphages on paper, like you thought that they would have been, or at least I'll just speak for myself, I thought that they would have been an excellent deck. I mean, you made a Pendulum deck, so obviously anything being Pendulum, it's going to have that really good high ceiling, and it's going to have an exceptional grind game just because the nature of the Pendulum mechanic itself. And you gave every single monster this awesome floodgate effect. You know, some of them lock out spells, some of them are, you know, macro cosmos. You have Goliath, the big boss monster, which is excellent. That is basically a big domain built into it. So it's like, how could this archetype fail so bad? And it's almost like Konami just made everything else outside of their Pendulum effects terrible. I mean, half of the monsters in the archetype have 0 attack, so it's like, okay, I guess we're just never going to be getting damage out of like half of our monsters. The Pendulum scales in the archetype are beyond terrible. I think they're like all 3s and 5s, and it's like, bro, what the fuck am I supposed to Pendulum summon when every monster in my deck is a 3 and 5? And it's almost like Konami just inherently gave them Achilles heels that no other Pendulum deck has to deal with. Number one, the monsters or the scales have to constantly like give up monsters to basically sustain themselves, and it's like, that's kind of dumb, because now if the Pendulum deck loses its field, it also hypothetically might lose its monsters, and that's something that generally shouldn't affect the Pendulum deck. If you were Geki or Dark Hole Pendulum deck, it's like, oh, no big deal, I'll just summon my shit back later. But you know, with Amorphages, you lose your monsters, and then, you know, when the standby phase comes around, your scales basically just go rip and you lose everything. So I don't know, Amorphages is a deck that should have worked, but there were so many pitfalls with it. I don't know, I think that Konami thought that if they would have actually not had all those drawbacks, it would have been overpowered because of the floodgates. But yeah, they really fucked this archetype up. Like, this is by far the worst Pendulum deck in the game, in my opinion. Next, we have Aromages, which I'm actually just going to call Aromas for the rest of the video, and I actually like the design of Aromas. I think it's really interesting because I've said consistently for years that there are not enough ways of gaining life points in Yu-Gi-Oh!, let alone trying to make like a competitive strategy out of it. It's almost impossible. There's like Soul Absorption, but I mean, that shit is like so gimmicky, and you have to basically run a bunch of banishing cards, etc., etc. Nobody's trying to do that. So it is kind of cool that they built an entire archetype around gaining life points, because Lord knows there's just so many ways of paying life points in Yu-Gi-Oh, whether it be through counter traps, solemns, and 7 tools and stuff like that. It be through floodgate, skill drain, soul drain, whatever drain. You can have royal oppression, imperial orders. So there's a lot of ways of like paying life points in Yu-Gi-Oh, but not a lot of ways of actually gaining. And I like that when you gain life points, you can activate their effects. The problem with Aromas is they kind of felt like they were sabotaged by Konami because all their effects feel intentionally watered down. Like there's no way Konami looked at these effects and thought, yeah, this will be perfectly fine in 2016. This is strong enough. Like, no, there's no way that they looked at a card like Rosemary, which Rosemary is your level 4 1800 monster. She should basically be like your flagship card, and when you look at her activated effect, it targets a monster and changes its battle position. It's like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with that? Like, come on, man. Would it have been too OP if I like destroyed the monster, or like, you know, put it on top of your deck, or you know, spun it to the bottom of the deck or something like that? You can clearly see that that is just a watered down effect that's going to feel mediocre the second you put it on the field and activate it. You're not going to be thrilled. You look at this guy, he's pretty much the same situation. If you activate his effect, you get the target one of your opponent's spells and traps and bounce it to their hand. It's like, come on, these effects are just, they are literally just mind-boggling bad. I mean, even if it could bounce your spells and traps, I was like, well, you know, maybe you could use like Call of the Haunted and Fiendish Chain over again, but you can't even do that. The only competent Aroma monster to me feels like Jasmine, because it lets you draw a card, and let's be real, drawing cards is going to be good in Yu-Gi-Oh until the end of time. The problem with Jasmine is it has 100 attacks, so you're never ever going to do damage with the card. So I don't know. I feel like Aromas don't work because they were inherently designed to be like underpowered with their monster effects, and the spells and traps are not nearly good enough to make up for that that gap between how weak the monster effects actually are at the time that they came out. Next is Shinobirds. I know some people are like, Cap G, didn't you do an excellent adventures of Shinobirds, and didn't you do replay? Yeah, just because I do replays of a deck doesn't mean it's good. Newsflash. Okay, so Shinobirds were, to me, it just seemed like Konami wanted to do something different. Clearly, they were trying to support the spirit mechanic, and why on earth did they make them rituals? Like, that is beyond my comprehension. First off, a ritual spirit monster should not exist because obviously spirits, like most of them, have to be normal summoned. So when I even saw that it was a spirit ritual, I was like, how is this even gonna work? And it's like, oh yeah, it doesn't work because your ritual monsters bounce themselves back to, you know, your hand during the end phase, and we got some good ritual monsters or good ritual archetypes during Arc V. Obviously, it goes without saying we got Nakraz, but we even got other ones that were, you know, I would say that mid-level, like could be pretty decent, like, what's that deck? Prediction Princess. Prediction Princess is actually very legitimate, man. If you get the big Prediction Princess out and you get Pot of Taboos, like, you could do some work with that. We got Cyber Angels, which were really good, but then you look at, like, Shinobirds, and it's just like, what were they even thinking when they made this archetype? And there's other monsters that you can, like, special summon from the deck, but then they don't get the bounce either. The only thing that I honestly like about Shinobirds is basically their continuous trap card, which, you know, it basically can blow up cards and it can stop attacks at the same time. Like, that card gives you a ton of utility, and it does kind of make up for the fact that you don't have a lot of field presence, because giving the tokens, like when the Shinobird monsters bounce back to your hand during the end phase, like giving tokens is nice in theory. The problem is they're really easy for your opponent to just kill. I mean, they only have like 1500 defense, so it's really nice in theory if you can have your tokens survive somehow until your next turn, because it becomes very easy for you to ritual summon again. But that's just like, that doesn't happen in 2016 2017 Yu-Gi-Oh, and like everybody knows that. And these guys came out of why am I thinking Breaker Shadows? Didn't they come out of the same? Nah, maybe they did come out of Breaker Shadows. For some reason I'm thinking that they came out of Raging Tempest, but you know what, I feel like Shinobirds did come out of Raging Tempest, and it's like, you're really gonna fight Zodiac with this? I'm gonna look that up. You guys let me know in the comment section below. Then we have Digital Bugs, which I have been told is the worst archetype in the Arc V era, and it is pretty damn hard to argue against that. Like, if you ask me what went wrong with Digibugs, I'd just be like, to be honest, everything. I mean, it's just so underwhelming and so bad. You're basically playing a deck that revolves around like switching battle positions to get a lot of its effects, and it's like, oh great, you know what I really want to play in my deck? Like Stumbling, said no one ever. So that's already kind of like, you know, something that's weighing the deck down. You look at the monsters, a lot of the main deck monsters, their stat lines are incredibly underwhelming, which it's already bad enough having to be an insect archetype. But like, the reason it worked with insectors, and the reason like Dragonfly can only be 1,000 attack and Hornet and Ladybug could be 500 and the deck could still rock and roll, is because you could have like 2 cards and blow up your opponent's entire field, and the deck could actually OTK with those little ass monsters because of like the equips and because of Gigamantis and stuff. So the attack of like insectors didn't matter. This deck doesn't have any explosive offense like that, and one of the things that didn't really make sense to me, and like, shame on Konami, how could you honestly be this dumb? Like, Digital Bugs are XC based, right? And to basically rank them up inherently, you have to give up 2 materials to go up you know, a couple of ranks, which is like, okay, I guess, but then you're not going to really have any materials left for your big monsters. So Konami finally decided to give them a rank up a fucking year after they came out in Shining Victories, and it's like, bro, who is running this game? Like, you didn't think about giving them a rank up card when you first released them? I mean, they just got their rank up in Shining Victories, and the crazy thing is, if you look at the Arc V era, how many archetypes have gotten rank ups? Like, how many XC archetypes? Raid Raptors have like 15 rank ups. Phantom Knights got a rank up card. What's the other one? Cypher's got a rank up. So there have been so many archetypes that have rank ups. I don't understand why Digital Bugs didn't launch with their rank up card. Also, it's once per turn, which is just like, really? Like, why can't I spam a bunch of XCs and Digibugs? I mean, it's not like the deck can do anything else right. And also, the freaking rank 5, this should be a quick effect. I mean, this archetype is too underpowered for this not to be a quick effect. Really, all of them should be quick effects. And then the last archetype that I want to talk about is one that is kind of close to my heart. It's Chimi Critters. Whoever designed this archetype, you are terrible at your job. And that is coming from someone who desperately wanted Chimi Critters to be so good, because just seeing Geminis again made me have a glimmer of hope. And, you know, you saw how obviously ABC were strong for the Union mechanic, but Chimi Critters are just atrocious, and there's so many things that don't make sense about Chimi Critters. For starters, I've said this before, if you don't have Catalyst Field, you aren't doing anything with this deck. Like, you really just can't play this deck without the field spell, and that's not me overstating it, like saying that you know, Phantasm Spirals need Pacifist to do anything. Like, no. Like, if you don't have Spark Field, you can't summon like half of the archetype. You can't even like put it on the board. You desperately need Spark Field, and when you have Spark Field, you actually get you get a little bit of you know, playmaking potential. You get the blow up cards on your opponent's side of the field. Your monsters come back, and you get the normal summon your big monsters out of your hand. But the design of them didn't even make a lot of sense, in my opinion. Like, half of the monsters are level 8s, and then the other half are like level 2s, and it's like, okay, that's already just creating this weird discrepancy between the monsters. And their boss monster is actually pretty decent. The XC, the Methane. The problem is, it's like, all right, well, if half the monsters are level 8 and you gave us a rank 8, well, why isn't there a rank 2? Another major problem with Chimi Critters, and this is really just Konami's fault, is the deck is so underdeveloped. I mean, it only got 1 set of support, which was Invasion Vengeance, if I'm not mistaken, and the archetype has like 1 spell and 1 trap. So it's like, what the fuck am I supposed to do if I don't have my 1 trap to, you know, defend myself or to try and make any plays? Am I supposed to use those, you know, Gemini support cards from like 5Ds, like fucking Supervise and stuff like that? I mean, Konami probably could have developed this archetype a lot better. I still will never understand why Crystron's got 2 sets of support and Chimi Critters got 1 set of support. Like, that is something that I just don't actually get. So yeah, Chimi Critters are just, I don't know, they felt like an archetype that was just kind of supposed to be out there, and Konami just kind of made it to give more support to Geminis, but they really didn't think it through, because you can even go back to like the support from 5Ds that Gemini's got, and it's better than Chimi Critters. Like, yeah, the field spell Catalyst Field is awesome, but everything else in Chimi Critters is honestly just trash. The Exceed is at least passable, but other than that, it's just a really, really bad archetype. So what do you guys think? I know this was a long video, but I did want to give a little bit of shine to each actual archetype, and I wanted to discuss them individually. I'm pretty sure that there's a bunch of terrible archetypes that I missed out on. I know someone's gonna say like Prediction Princess. I promise you, man, get the freaking Prediction Princess ritual chick on the field, and then get Pot of Taboos and see if somebody don't get wrecked by that shit. Unless they get Dark Hole, you know, you got Dark Hole or something like that, then you're gonna get wrecked. But in general, these are the archetypes that I believe are extremely bad. And if you guys agree or disagree, let me know in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching as always, and subscribe if you have not already.